Hi, I'm Adrian Strittmatter. Welcome to Bricks and More. I'm the CEO and co-founder of SAENTYS, a global creative consultancy specializing in destinations, real estate, and the hospitality sector. Bricks and More is all about exploring how to generate, unlock, and maximize real estate value. Our mission is to challenge outdated and limiting notions of how this is done. In each episode, we talk to top professionals to uncover innovative strategies that drive short, medium, and long-term gains. So if you're passionate about making real estate more valuable for more people, you're in the right place. Welcome to Bricks and More.
Offices aren't just places to work. They're ecosystems that can inspire, connect, and drive success. But with shifting tenant demands, evolving work habits, and the ever-growing need for sustainability, how do you create, package, lease, and sell a workspace that truly stands out and stands the test of time? We're diving into the future of workspaces with someone who truly understands what it takes to create offices that people want to be in. Louise Ioannou is the head of Workspace for HB Reavis in the UK, leading the charge in shaping some of London's most innovative office destinations. She has over 15 years' experience that span branding, marketing, placemaking, and more importantly, leasing, helping to productize offices across traditional leases, managed spaces, and co-working. So I'm absolutely thrilled to welcome Louise to Bricks and More. Hi, Louise. Lovely to have you on Bricks and More.
Hi, thank you for having me.
We've worked together quite a lot over the last couple of years, and I was wondering, in terms of your journey from branding now into leasing and workspaces, if you could tell us a little bit more about your journey within real estate and commercial real estate more specifically.
Yeah, so I've always had a client services background. After several years working in advertising, I moved into property marketing where HB Reavis was my client, and I worked with them across their UK and European portfolio, and it was quite a natural progression that I then moved in-house to working with them. And after a few years of heading up marketing and PR for the UK team, I worked really closely with specifically the leasing team, but also with Stephen, our CEO, and had exposure to all of the teams internally. So it was quite a pivotal moment for me moving into leasing, but I felt that I'd had the kind of internal support to progress my role into the next step and move into leasing. And yeah, ultimately that's moved me into the next phase of my career. And Stephen has then entrusted me with heading up all of our client-facing activities across leasing, so traditional leasing, and then also our flex workspaces, including Hub.
I've got a kind of personal question because I've always been agency side.
Yeah.
It's a slight off-piece question with regards to the topic of the podcast, but what would you say the main differences are, apart from the sort of moving from agency to client side, on the branding and sort of the marketing elements of agency life versus client side life?
Yeah, I think this is one of the topics I could probably talk all day about. I think in terms of challenges, I think it's made me a better client, and perhaps something that's taken a bit of time to realise and make sure I bring that to the forefront is that I understand the challenges that agencies might have. I think it helps me write, and you can disagree, but it helps me write a better brief and to help understand how to communicate that.
I would agree, yeah.
And then also help to be that link between agency and then internally making sure we're communicating to our teams what's required and how to deliver a campaign. So I think it's a helpful bridge.
Of having worked on both sides.
Yeah, having worked on both sides. And then also whether you're working with agents or marketing agency, there are similar challenges of we are fully dedicated to our own project. So our work is obviously the most important to us, but when you're working with external agencies, obviously you've got multiple clients to keep happy and to
we
prioritise.
Tell you that that's not the case.
Yeah, I think that's probably one of the insights that's helpful to understand.
And I think in terms of you moving from the marketing and the branding side into the leasing side has obviously come at quite a pivotal moment for the sort of the office or the work-led space environment. Quick question that we've asked all our guests on the podcast since the beginning. 2025, after a couple of sort of tough years, and we'll come back to moving into leasing and packaging offices a bit later. How are you and HB Reavis viewing 2025 in respect to the last 2, 3, maybe 4 years?
I think there's still a huge amount of uncertainty. But if I just comment from just purely a leasing perspective, I think there's already we're coming to the end of Q1, the demand has been really strong, particularly on flex space. I think like the number of deals that we've delivered in Q1 versus same time last year, I think is much stronger. I think companies are really starting to value, or increasingly continuing to value, high quality workspaces. And if I think the last 5 years as a business, we've delivered over like 10 million square feet of space, and there's around 1% vacancy. So I think that's just proving the fact that we're on the right track of the type of product that we're delivering to the market, and that's what's in demand. And so I think, it's just proven the type of product that we're delivering, there's occupier demand for.
And that occupier demand, I think there's obviously been, over the last sort of 3 to 4 years, a lot of headlines, a lot of things that have fed into the perception of what makes a good workspace, what makes a good office workspace environment. What is for you a good work destination?
I think we've focused on, and we were doing this pre-pandemic, and something that we've continued to evolve our offering since, but the focus around wellness and the focus around customer experience and hospitality in the work environment, I think that has to be what you come to work for. You can choose to work, when you can choose to work from anywhere, you want to make sure you're working from the best place. And I think if you're in an environment that, you could achieve more with your day, whether that's because you've got access to a fitness studio, garden, terrace spaces, event spaces that, programmed events taking place because the building or kind of the workspace that you're in is hosting for you and supporting your company. I think they're really, I'm sure we'll chat through it more, but I think they are really important ingredients that we've really focused on. It was a commitment that we made. I think it was if I remember correctly, it was 2018 that we committed that all of our developments across Europe would be WELL Gold or higher. And I think that was before the word COVID was talked about. And so, delivering on that, I think, is very important, that we've focused on health and well-being of employees from the beginning, and it's encouraging, as we said, that occupiers do value that.
There seems to be a kind of disconnect sometimes between what you hear in the market and the kind of reality of the market that you're talking about, those metrics, that's 2025, those green shoots, that cautious optimism. There seems to be sometimes with the market noise a kind of concern to talk up the office by people who are not involved in offices. Why do you think that perception is still there or still lingering?
I think one of the misconceptions is around people shedding office space, which, from what we see, actually, the last 5 years, actually, where we've given the options within our leases for occupiers to expand, all occupiers have taken up on that and have also shown that they're outgrowing the space that they've taken. So I think there is a mismatch. I think that might not be for everybody, but I think the type of product that we're delivering, creating that flexibility, creating highly amenitized office space or office buildings, shows that they are well used and in demand. I think we also work with our occupiers, and whether I'm speaking to companies, whether that's a small 10-person business through to much larger organisations, they're working with us of like how we can help them bring their employees back into the office. And so I think what's being said isn't necessarily the reality of what happens day to day. And I think that's one of the unspoken truths, is that actually companies do want their teams to be back together. And we're helping them do that.
But still, you're right, it's still a very tenuous or difficult argument to have in some quarters.
Yeah, because you want to show that you are flexible as an employer and enabling your employee and how you enable your employees to work. But I would say most companies want their teams to be together in some way. And we're creating spaces to help them do that.
And a bit of a poison chalice question, if you don't mind.
Thank you.
It's quite all right. Do you think there's still value to be generated in the office sector from a developer, investor, people who are bringing these office spaces to the market? Do you still think there's value to be generated there?
I think there is. It's increasingly difficult, obviously, because taking into account development challenges that the industry is facing, which is why you'll see that there is a constrained office supply. If you look at the next 5 years, I think it is difficult to bring new development forward for various reasons. But in terms of the right product, I think that's in demand, and therefore, as we've said, if you're able to deliver buildings that are highly attractive because they are sustainable, they create flexibility for occupiers, they focus on wellness for employees, for occupiers, I think you will attract occupiers into the development. And for that, yes, there is value to be generated. And I think also on the other side is, well, how do you look at value? If you're an occupier, if we think now, 10 to 15% of the building is now amenity. So the value that occupiers also benefit from is greater than perhaps, say, developments that we may have delivered 10 years ago, for example.
And then specifically on that notion of value, how does HB Reavis calculate sort of the value of its assets, and what are the metrics that you would say, obviously some of them are clearly going to be financial, but that would define success? They're like, yeah, this has ticked these boxes, the financial one being the obvious one, but what are the other metrics that you guys would be looking at?
I think fundamentally, we're still looking at traditional values such as length of lease, quality of the occupier, that will drive attractiveness of the asset to, say, a potential investor. But I think we're also looking at, well, what are the building's core fundamentals? So how sustainable is the building, and how future-proofed is it against future sustainability credentials that may come in? So I think they are that is a key metric. And then also, how can you demonstrate that the building will be able to retain its occupiers? So what are the types of amenity that the building is delivering that they're not going to leave in 5-10 years' time? So that's something. And how can you flex that space to be able to retain your occupiers and remain engaged with them?
And sort of taking that journey with an occupier and sort of going to the beginning when they're going to consider signing a lease or an extension of a lease, but let's say a new lease in one of your new buildings. Have you seen the difference in the way that you now have to package that offer to make it more attractive to them? What have you changed maybe over the last couple of years in your packaging or positioning of the offer?
I think we've the way our company and the way our teams are set up is quite unique. So we have dedicated project teams, and you are completely product obsessed with that particular development. And from the outset, you start with your value proposition of what are you designing, who is it for, who's the customer. So at that point in time, at the start of the product journey, everyone is focused on what are you creating, who is it for, when are you going to lease it, what are the timelines. And much as you'd be creating a product and for any consumer-facing product, that's how we really treat our developments. And so, the output may vary slightly. It might look slightly different because, let's take Worship Square, for example. The type of amenity that we've included in Worship Square might be different to what we delivered at Bloom Clerkenwell a few years ago. But the approach and kind of the way we look at our product and how we market it from a consumer perspective is quite consistent. We want to make sure that we know who our customer is. We know when we're trying to target them, and we'll do everything on that journey to make sure we reach our target occupier.
And I think that's super interesting, because I think a lot of the times when we're in conversations, especially on B2B sort of commercial real estate, there's a really strong understanding about the location, a really strong understanding about the product. But sometimes when you try and challenge or ask people about the end consumer, it's a little bit more flaky or less precise. How are you now, especially when you're talking to these companies, have you found a difference in who you're talking to and how you're talking to them, and how you're defining who your potentially multiple audiences now are in B2B.
Yeah, I think who we're talking to has evolved. So increasingly, yes, obviously you're talking to head of real estate, but increasingly the role of HR functions, people functions are far more involved in the decision-making process. But I think how we reach our, say, target occupier is also slightly different. So we're making sure that we take a 360 approach through, and obviously working with our marketing teams and agencies to target our occupiers, whether that's through online channels, offline channels. And it's not just, we've developed a leasing brochure and we hand it over to agents and expect to lease our buildings. Like and to anyone and to anyone who's had the fortune to work with our team, we are incredibly hands-on.
You're involved.
We're involved. We're really involved at every step in the process. But then that's how we've been able to lease our buildings, so that we have no vacancy in our buildings.
Yeah, I think that's amazing.
That's how we've been able to show that why it's an important approach is because we are incredibly hands-on. We know our customer, we know the product, we know what we need to deliver. And yeah, the way we market the product may have evolved over the last few years. And yes, the level of amenity or the level of flexibility has evolved, but our approach, an HB Reavis approach, is that we are incredibly product focused, and that the leasing team does not work on its own. The leasing team works in complete connection with design, development, construction, procurement, and everything about the project journey from the start to the finish.
And specifically on the productization of office spaces, and which then has a knock-on effect probably to lease contracts. You've obviously got serviced, you've got co-working, you've got flexible, you've got traditional. Does that come into consideration as well as how a building can productize its different lease types for different tenants?
And again, that's all part of the initial value proposition and business planning phase. Is you will look at a scheme and we'll look at the amount of amenity we need to create. We'll look at the amount of flexibility that we'll offer, whether that's through, and we want to create kind of a blend of managed space, co-work space, so there's that flexibility for occupiers to scale up and down as needed. So yeah, that's that. And that comes from having a really clear brief at the outset. And then the way the building is then marketed is then authentic because you've set out your product from the beginning.
We've talked about evolving trends, evolving people who will be involved in the decision to lease space, to take space, or to stay in space. What would you say for you in HB Reavis makes an office irresistible in 2025?
I think the secret sauce being around how we can support occupiers in their own corporate objectives. So we're obviously concerned about our Scope 1 emissions, so the embodied carbon, but we also, being a responsible developer, we obviously want to make sure that the building is supporting occupiers in their operational goals as well. So we want to make sure that we're supporting them in whether it's Scope 2 and 3 emissions, and we can support in their reporting, and ultimately how the building operates to support them. So does it enable them to have that flexibility on what are the spaces that they need beyond their demise? So can we create event space? Can we create scale workspace for them to expand and contract within? So I think they're all ingredients that create that stickiness.
Yeah, you're right. Because I think the operational goals, and we've seen it sometimes when we've had to pitch buildings, depending on who's in the room, who is going to be the decision driver. Is it going to be, as you said, like a sustainability play or a location play or an occupational play, or even sometimes a brand play with people where your destination, your office space becomes a way of responding to those challenges that they have. In terms of, I would say, beyond occupancy rates, and really when you've got an active building, how do you measure success or value in that sense? So you've got your building, it's occupied. I mean, do you go and visit your buildings that you've created afterwards? Or
I think beyond occupancy, we have to talk about retention. That is really an important way of demonstrating building success. And that's retention when we talk about on a traditional lease, but also if we think about, if I have my hub hat on and we think about flex workspace as well. So I think that's really important. And it's for that reason that you want to deliver all of the amenity space and all of the space for an occupier to expand, contract within, because what are the reasons for them to stay? You want to make it, you don't want them to leave. So how can you support their business longer term? And yes, I have perched myself very firmly in the lobby of Worship Square, particularly for the last few months as we've welcomed our new occupiers into the building. And it's just so nice just to see people coming into the building, using it as you expected. If there's any challenges, you're there. You can help see if there's anything that needs to be resolved. But actually, just seeing people enjoy the space, especially when I've talked about it quite a lot recently. But we acquired the building a month before the first lockdown. The team was assembled during the pandemic, and the building was delivered during the pandemic. And so now to see people together enjoying the space, that's really nice. Obviously, we'll carry out occupier surveys and engagement surveys to make sure that our occupiers are enjoying it. But that's the nice bit of just being able to sit and observe and just see that actually, yes, the building is being used and enjoyed.
Do you think maybe that in terms of this new, I'm going to say it's a new focus. Yeah, this new focus on retention has been to some degree motivated by more flexible leases and contracts coming into the market? Because I think from a sort of landlord perspective, if someone signs up for a 10 to 15 year lease, it doesn't really force you, it's kind of see you in 10 years kind of thing. Do you think there's more flexibility in the leases, more flexibility in products, which means that retention idea is more prevalent now? Or is it something that you guys have always kind of done?
I think if we focus on flex spaces, it might not be the most popular answer, but the shorter your term, every time there's churn and you've got a new member coming in, you're paying a broker fee. From a business plan perspective, retention is completely crucial. Apologies to anybody.
But returning customers,
But ultimately that's the fundamental reason why you need to ensure you have got member retention. And so, of course, you're going to do everything possible to make sure your members are happy and satisfied, because if they are, then they're going to stay with you. And also you're creating a more enjoyable or more productive working environment for them to be in. So it helps both sides that you focus on retention. And we've got teams dedicated to programming community events, event space, member experience teams, just to make sure that everyone is focused operationally on supporting our members. And then you mentioned on the longer term leases. So, the same way we are very hands-on during product development phase, that has to stay in place for when we are managing our assets. And, and the way we manage our assets is as equally hands-on as possible during the life cycle of our building. And also it may varies market to market in terms of the number of assets we have under our active management at any one time. So it's market specific, but it's something that we look to look after in-house wherever we can, because
the operational side.
So we've got huge asset management teams looking after all of our buildings across Europe, and that is that doesn't drop off. Just we've been super product obsessed during development. That doesn't finish when we've then signed a lease, and we're not ones to then say, okay, thanks, see you in 10 years' time.
Because I think that's definitely a shift that we've seen from landlord, owner, asset manager, moving into more of an active role and now becoming to some degree owner operators as well. And it's successfully operating a building. That's why you have third parties that often do it. Like internally is quite a difficult ask. In terms of a specific sort of project that you've mentioned, and I know that we're very close to it here, what would you say have been the success factors behind one of those developments that you're going to talk about, that case study in person?
I can't not talk about Worship Square in terms of exceptional sustainability credentials, both from an embodied carbon perspective, so during construction and the way the building's been designed to operate. I think in terms of creating a future-proofed assets, that for us is a project that we're all exceptionally proud of. But also it's a 140,000 square foot building, yet it has two larger organisations occupying the traditional office space, but we also have a managed workspace offering, and we also have around 17,000 square feet of Hub, which is delivering the affordable workspace that we've committed to deliver for Hackney. And that is a range of private office space, co-work spaces, as well as an events auditorium. And then also around 9,000 square feet of terrace space between communal, private outdoor areas, and then a fitness studio. So I think we're just trying to cater for within the building, whether you are a freelancer, one small business, or, as Wise are, over 80,000 square foot occupier, the building can accommodate any size business. And I think, again, as in response to perhaps some of the challenges as a kind of outcome of the pandemic, the building is really trying to bring people together, whether that's through the event space, through having this active lobby area for trying to welcome business of any size and bring people together. I think that's something that's really important to the fundamentals of the building.
Of creating a sort of, as you mentioned, maybe we can go to a bit more detail, a kind of work-based community. So you're sort of allowing people to create that, allowing occupiers to create that for their employees and for their staff.
Exactly.
In terms of future-proofing of a building, and if we continue on Worship Square, but it's clearly successful now, clearly successful for the coming years, because obviously you've got longer lease terms. How do you future-proof? How do you look at the project or the product now and post-delivery project yourself for the next 5 to 10 years? Are there any things that are coming up which you go, okay, we're going to have to think about that for this building to make sure it stays at the top of its game?
Well, I think, again, just bringing it back to the fundamental value proposition of the scheme, we've focused on sustainability. That's a huge lever, let's say, for the building's attractiveness going forward. I think working with occupiers to ensure that the building operates as intended. We're targeting NABERS rating for Worship Square, and once the building is occupied and has been commissioned over the next 12 months, that will be interesting to see how the building then delivers on its targets, and being focused on its operational efficiency and any learnings from that. I think the other point around the flexibility, we are delivering through Hub, delivering the affordable workspace for Hackney, and I think making sure that we're engaged with and partnered with local community and how we continue to programme that space, I think will be quite interesting to look at. Yeah, I think they're the bits we're focusing around, the community piece, which is something that I feel incredibly passionate around, and then sustainability, which will become not just a nice to have. It's essential in order to be able to deliver a future-proofed asset.
And in that, again, going back to the topic you mentioned, the community-focused aspect of creating real destinations that obviously work for their tenants, but also work for the broader community. How have you seen that sort of becoming more prevalent in sort of office destinations?
So for me, the last 12 months have been really focused on a piece of research that we've just recently undertaken with Future Places Studio. And I'm completely passionate around the role of community in the workplace. I think we're, as a society, facing a loneliness epidemic. And if you think of the future of work, how can, everyone, I think it's a nonsense to continue trying to solve future of work by discussing the number of days you should be working from the office. I think that is completely the wrong angle. And actually we should be looking at how we can solve for bigger picture societal challenges through the workplace. And, in a time where you can work from anywhere, why are people still so lonely, and why, as a society, are people suffering with so many mental health challenges? And therefore, taking that into account, how can we solve for that through the places that we create? And that, for me, is why I think community as a lever is only going to rise in importance. And therefore, if a way of solving that is bringing people together, because we know that when people are together, they feel engaged, they have a greater sense of belonging, engagement. They will then, in turn, feel a sense of loyalty to the company that they work for, and they are then feeling more content and more productive. And that might seem a really ideological kind of thought process, but I'm happy that we've produced this bit of research that supports that. And I'm not saying that we've solved for it. I'm just saying that
you're addressing it.
We're addressing it. Yeah, I feel like we're addressing it, and we're opening the conversation. And there's some learnings to be had, and some I'm sure we'll learn more along the way. But I think if they are challenges that we try to solve for in the workplace design, then that's how we push forward with the future of work. Future of work isn't a destination. It's constantly evolving, and there'll be changing challenges along the way. But for me at the moment, I feel like that's a really important one that we should be addressing. How are we being responsible developers in the spaces that we create for occupiers, and how are we supporting the people that come into our buildings?
And you obviously, HB Reavis is active in different markets. And you're specifically also responsible for the UK one, but have a view on what's happening in the other markets. Do you see there's a difference with regards to the kind of elements or the challenges that we have, or that you have in London, versus some of the challenges they have on, let's say, mainland Europe in different countries?
Yeah, I think it's market specific, but I think what's ingrained in everyone within the company is the approach to well-being. I think, and also the space in between the office. I think if you look at all of the buildings we've delivered in varying degrees, in varying ways, we've all as a collective, as a business, have delivered spaces that focus on access to nature, green spaces, fitness spaces. I think that the focus on physical and mental well-being has been a common thread across all of our schemes. And yet the output might look slightly different between buildings, but I think I think that's been an important focus.
And in terms of the operational side of the building, or the amenity side of the building, obviously, as you said, you've got a very hands-on approach, but obviously you can't do everything. Are there any really good partnerships that you've set up in some of your buildings with operators who've really understood where you were going with this building and been able to partner with you to deliver your vision?
There's one that we're working on at the moment for the UK, a small offering within Hub, which watch this space because it should be launching soon. But in terms of partnerships, we obviously work with, we don't do everything on our own, of course. We have a curated team for each project that we work with, and that will always be whoever's most relevant for that particular project. I think it was 2022, we launched a partnership with the South Bank Centre where we wanted to demonstrate our commitment to the local area, to the community, linking that, but also trying to create kind of a workspace kind of relevance to it. And so we founded a programme with the South Bank Centre called Culture Works, which I guess was probably the sort of seedlings and start of the idea of around the importance of community and access to culture and well-being, the well-being benefits that come out of that. But yeah, we have a partnership with the South Bank Centre, which means we're able to give all of our occupiers and our Hub members free access to tickets, to curated events, bespoke events for those members. And yeah, our partnership then means that they get corporate level access to the South Bank Centre. And yeah, that's not something that we could create on our own. And it's partnerships like that we look to create. But yeah, that's one that is an important area for us as a business. Partnerships like that, I think, is important that we continue to offer.
And if you were to sort of, again, project yourself into the future, and you were given sort of carte blanche to create the best kind of office destination in the future that really created value for all its stakeholders and all the people that were going to engage with it, what would that look like? What would it be?
I'm glad I used the South Bank Centre as my preamble to my next answer.
Your segue.
I know I'm completely biased, but
That's fine.
the redevelopment of Elizabeth House and creating One Waterloo, to me, is the ideal workplace destination. It's directly next door to Waterloo Station, one of the busiest stations in London. You are overlooking the Thames, iconic London skyline. We've designed a scheme that would create a huge amount of public realm interfacing with the workplace, interfacing with 100,000 square feet of pedestrianised retail street. You'd be smack bang next to Waterloo Station with access to 3 acres of outdoor space. And you have access to genuinely heart and soul, being on the kind of doorstep of the South Bank cultural hub. And I think it's got all the ingredients to be an ideal workplace destination.
In terms of, for you now, what will really, in your new role, shape the future of office leasing and workplace destination leasing and activation, what would you say it's going to be? What are the trends?
I think something that served me well is that I've always had a client services background. And I think that, plus also the marketing background and understanding how to deliver messaging and deliver product marketing, I think the customer focus has to be essential. You need to understand who your target occupier is and be able to translate the building that you're creating and how that has value to them, making sure that you're able to translate the technical side of the building and making sure that it feels tangible and real to them, of how it will improve and enhance their way of working. Does that answer it?
Yeah, it does. And one sort of final question really from me is have you ever sort of, when you do go and people watch in the developments that you guys have delivered, have you sometimes seen people using, and it happens with technology sometimes, seen people using the space in a way that you potentially hadn't planned, or in some sort of surprising way where you go like, oh, okay, that's interesting. We haven't thought of it in that way.
So in terms of how the spaces are being used, I think when we delivered Hub at 20 Farringdon Street, they are serviced office spaces. The majority of the offices there all have access to the shared amenity, shared meeting rooms, for instance, whereas we've actually evolved our offering of Hub at Worship Square. So now actually the demand has been far greater for having self-contained spaces where we've delivered, broadly each office suite has actually got its own meeting rooms, its own dedicated kitchens, because increasingly I think companies want private spaces where they operate, but then they also want to be connected to something greater as well. So they get the best of both worlds, where they have their own private self-contained office units, but then they also can plug into the wider community programming.
Well, they also don't have to worry about it in that sense.
I think that's been an interesting pivot in terms of Hub's next offer and iteration within Hub's life cycle.
No, that's super interesting. So they're happy to manage their own things, but they're happy to come to the communal kitchen, the communal services.
I think they want to have
run.
they want to have their own meeting rooms without having to necessarily share that with other companies. But then you also want the best of both worlds, where you want access to the event space, you want programmed, curated events that their teams can come to, because not all companies have an in-house team that can look after curating that employee experience. So you're able to lean on the Hub team for that, whereas they're still being able to operate their company in a more private way.
In a more private space.
I'd say one slight unexpected outcome of the technology that we deployed into our spaces. So at Bloom, we delivered a ready-to-work managed workspace, and we communicated and we delivered that we'd be able to manage and report on utilisation rates, occupancy, as well as the indoor environmental credentials of the space. And we could quite quickly see that an occupier was going to outgrow their space, which they did, and they've subsequently moved on. But that was, okay, well, we've transparently reported on the data and how it was being used. And I think then you have to think about, okay, well, how can we accommodate their growing business within the space. And actually the data's telling you that they're quickly going to outgrow it, and probably, if you haven't got space to accommodate them within the building, well, where are they going? So I think that was an unexpected outcome of the data. But, it was there, and we were obviously reporting on it transparently to them and finding ways to help, keep them for as long as possible.
As long as possible. We were talking at the beginning of 2025 and there being cautious optimism, green shoots. With everything that we've discussed and the future-proofing and the occupiers and the quality of the office and the community inclusion, do you think it's safe to say that we'll be moving from green shoots to green pastures in the future? Or is that too crazy?
I think we've approached with some cautious optimism. If Q1's anything to go by, I think demand has certainly increased for Workspace, for high quality spaces that we're delivering. And I think if we can continue to ensure that we're tackling challenge, I think as we mentioned around community, that just feels like an open door of something that we can continue to tackle and demonstrate the benefit of. And that I think can bring real business value in bringing people together and demonstrating how, that can support engagement and performance. And that's an important theme that we should be continuing to deliver on. So the social aspect of developments should continue to be at the forefront.
Perfect. Well, hi, Louise. Oh, not hi, Louise. Jesus, we're starting again. Now off we go. So, Louise, thanks ever so much for coming on the podcast. It's been a really insightful journey. I hope you enjoyed it too.
I did. Thank you.
Thanks for listening to Bricks and More. If you've enjoyed today's episode, please share it with a colleague or friend who would appreciate it. If you're not already, connect with me on LinkedIn, whether to say hello or discuss a destination, real estate, or hospitality project of your own. Finally, please rate the podcast on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. Again, share the episode, connect with me on LinkedIn, and rate the podcast. I'm Adrian Strittmatter, and I'll be back soon with the next episode.